Do you like epic games, games that tell a story? Do you look for these unique PlayStations that you'll remember for 20 years? Hello fellow gamers, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu and you're watching my series of videos where I tackle the rules of heavy games. And not only the rules, also some few basic strategies to help you feel comfortable at the game table. So here we go, it's time to overcome my delicious French accent and take a seat together in front of that heavy game box. Welcome my friends, I'm Jean-Michel Grosjeu. Hello my dear friends, I'm happy to meet you again today because today we will study together another game that made history, at last the history of heavy gaming. Today I invite you to discover Successors, a game from 1997 by Richard Berg and Mark Simonich. First published back in the days by the Avalon Hill Game Company, the so famous pioneer of heavy game publishing, then published again in 2008 by GMT Games, and today by Phalanx for its fourth publishing. This is this last version that we will explore together today. Richard Berg is the renowned author of SPQR and a lot of games in the Great Battles of History series. And he's the one who designed the old War of the Ring, a game that shaped my love for heavy games. Mark Simonich created some well-known games from GMT's line, and especially Hannibal, Rome vs. Carthage, the big daddy of Successors. And so, as usual, my goal is to give you the best tool, not only to learn this game, but to help you bringing the 5 players you need around your game table. Just tell them to go to YouTube, watch my videos, and voila, everybody's ready to fight. Okay, now close your eyes and imagine we are in 323 BC and Alexander the Great just died in Babylon. He was the ruler of one of the biggest empires in history, stretching from Greece to Persia, and he just died without any clearly designated heir, his son Alexandros being far too young to take the reins. And so, you are 5 of the most powerful generals in Alexander's army. And each of you, as a leader in your European, African or Asian province, feels that now is the time to seize this opportunity. You are convinced you will be the successor of Alexander and you are ready to fight for it. And that's what this game is all about. A game for 5 players. If you want to play with less, I invite you to check in the rulebook the slight differences in setup and victory conditions. From now, we will learn the rules together with a series of 3 videos. In the first one, the one you are just watching, we will see how to win the game. This is the main point and the most important to understand. In the second video, because Successors is mainly a military game, we will look at field operations, how to move armies and how to fight. And finally, in the third and last video, we will add special rules and special units that make this game a simulation of these ancient times. Elephants, of course, but also the dreaded silver shields, and some details about how to bury Alexander's dead body. This third video will also be the time for a general wrap-up of all the rules with some handy player aid. And so here we are. This is Alexander's empire at the time of his death in 323 BC. Alexander the Great died in Babylon, and that's where still lies his dead body in a splendid funeral cart. At this very moment, Alexander's 10 best generals are spread among his empire, each of them dealing with their own provincial affairs. At the beginning of the game, each player takes control of 2 of these generals, and each of them comes with the province they rule. Players put markers of their color to show the locations they control. And so, looking at this map, you can understand the first goal of this game. At the time of Alexander's death, each player playing 2 generals owns a little piece of the empire. And perhaps, with a little conquest, he will be able to possess more and become Alexander's successor by the sheer power of territory. In game terms, Alexander's empire is divided in 33 provinces. These provinces are not equal. Some of them, Aegyptos, Hellas, and Babylonia, are very important, being the key to Africa, Europe, and Asia. So, every province has a value between 1 for the lesser territories and 6 for the main ones. This value is printed on the map inside orange boxes. These values are victory points. In our example, at the beginning of the game, red player controls Macedonia and Microphrygia, worth 3 and 2 victory points, so at the beginning of the game, red player owns 5 victory points. We show that on the victory point track at the bottom of the map with red special counter. Likewise, blue player has 5 victory points, green 4, yellow 10, and black 4. And thus you understand how to win this game. In a 5-player game, as soon as a player reaches 20 victory points, the game ends immediately and this player is the winner. This simulates that former Alexander's generals could take the throne just by invading key provinces with their armies. This is a military victory. We will see very soon how to control new territories, but for the moment, keep in mind that one of the main ways to win this game is to expand your military influence over a larger territory. In addition to provinces, players can also earn victory points by conquering special objectives. 4 bonus points for being the Lord of Asia. That means for controlling Phrygia, Syria, and Babylonia. Note also that there is a card for every province, so that player can keep a record of their provinces by keeping these cards in front of them. And because controlling these 3 provinces still gives the regular victory points of 3, 2, and 4, with the Lord of Asia bonus, that makes a total of 13 victory points, not so far from the victory threshold of 20. You also gain a bonus of 2 victory points for controlling the Hellespont, that is the narrow strait between Europe and Asia. In order to control the strait and gain the 2 victory points, a player must control the 5 blue locations with the letter H. And that's pretty much it. We will see later 2 other bonuses, one for having the largest fleet and the other for building a capital city, but they require rules we don't know already, so more on that later. Okay, but there is a second way to win. You are not bound to be brutal, and you can inherit the throne by the sole right of your blood. Alexander the Great has a family, a son, a mother, brother and sisters, and you can get favor with these people and gain the right to rule the empire even if you don't control its territory. This is called a legitimacy victory. And like victory points for military victory, there are legitimacy points you can earn by controlling people from the royal family. There is no link at all between legitimacy points and victory points. You can gain some while losing others, and there is a second track for recording legitimacy. If a player ever reaches 18 legitimacy points, he wins immediately. Legitimacy points are earned by controlling people from the royal family. And first of all, 3 people constitute the direct lineage of Alexander. His son, Alexandros, stays in Babylon, but he is too young to reign. Nevertheless, controlling him brings 5 legitimacy points. Under him in the lineage is Philippos, Alexander's brother. He is not on the map at the beginning of the game and can appear randomly by the play of a card. Controlling him is worth 4 legitimacy points. And finally, at the bottom of the lineage, Heracles, the illegitimate son of Alexander. He lives in Damascus and is worth 2 legitimacy points. Beware, there's only 1 line of heirs, so 1 player can earn legitimacy from only one of these 3 people. If a red player controls Alexandros and a yellow player Heracles, red player has 5 legitimacy points and yellow 2. But if red player takes controls over Heracles, yellow player loses his 2 points, but red doesn't gain any more legitimacy. Having 2 heirs under his control, he only gets legitimacy for the highest of the 2. Then there are 3 influential women. Olympias, she is Alexander's mother. a very powerful woman with a strong political network. She lives in Molosia in the province of Epeiros. Controlling her brings 3 legitimacy points. Then there is Cleopatra, Alexander's sister. She is not the Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, that you know. This Cleopatra lives in Sardes in the province of Lydia, and she is as influential as Alexander's mother with 3 legitimacy points. And finally, Thessalonike, Alexander's half-sister. She lives in Pella, Alexander's home city, in the heart of Macedonia. Controlling her brings 2 legitimacy points. So these 3 women looks a lot like the 3 heirs, but there are 2 big differences. First, it is not enough to send an army to control them. In fact, there is a special card that matches each woman. And you need this card to convince her to do an alliance or a diplomatic marriage. So it's more difficult to control these women than the heirs. We will see later how you get and how you play these cards, but for the moment, just remember that they make your job more difficult. On the other hand, you can seal an alliance with the 3 of them. You are not limited to 1 like with the heirs. For example, if red player controls all 3 women, he gets a total of 8 legitimacy points. There are other ways to gain legitimacy. First, the player who controls Macedonia gains 2 legitimacy for being the strategos, because Macedonia is the cradle of the empire. Then, 2 generals were very close to Alexander: Perdiccas, regent of the empire, and Leonatos. Having one of these generals in your faction gives 1 legitimacy point, as written on these generals' cards. As we will see, a general never changes faction. So this legitimacy point is earned at the very beginning of the game when players choose their starting generals and is never lost unless the general dies. Some event cards also give a legitimacy bonus or penalty. We will see later when players draw and play such cards, but as you could imagine, these legitimacy points are much more random. Okay, that's fine, but if you sum up all these possible legitimacy points, you barely reach the 18 you need to win the game. So, as you guess, there are still 2 sources of legitimacy, and these 2 are the main ones. First, Alexander's own dead body. And so, it starts as a funeral cart. At the beginning of the game, this figure stands in Babylon, the city where Alexander died. And just like the royal heirs we saw just before, the cart belongs to the player who brings a general there. So at the beginning of the game, the cart belongs to the player who owns General Perdiccas, the general who starts at Babylon. But the funeral cart by itself doesn't give any legitimacy points. The player first has to bury Alexander in a tomb. We will see later how to do that, but for the moment, just remember that a player can build the tomb in any major city he controls. A major city is a square location on the map. So, for example, green player could just bury Alexander here in Babylon. He changes the funeral cart figure for the tomb and earns 2 legitimacy points. Note that when changing the cart for the tomb, I removed the green control ring, and that's because nobody can control the tomb by itself. You can control the funeral cart, but not the tomb. And the tomb's 2 legitimacy points are for the player who controls the city where the tomb lies. So here, Babylon. If another player takes control of the city, he takes the 2 legitimacy points for Alexander's tomb. But there is a better way to bury Alexander's body. If the player owning the funeral cart brings it across Asia and Europe up to Pella, the very home city of Alexander, at the heart of Macedonia, and if he buries him there, he immediately earns 10 legitimacy points. And he keeps these points even if he loses the control of the city of Pella. These 10 points are given for the action of burying Alexander in Pella, not for the control of the tomb. And finally, there are still 3 legitimacy points that every player gets at the beginning of the game just for being loyal to the empire. These are called champions points. And each player puts his 3 legitimacy points marker on his personal mat. These 3 points represent the fact that players are generals loyal to the empire. And as such, they would never attack each other. Then, during the game, if a player actually attacks another player, he kind of betrays the spirit of Alexander's empire and loses his champion status and the 3 legitimacy points that come with it. After losing it, there is no way to regain the champion status, no way but to reach 0 victory points. If at some point you control no province on the map and have no other victory points anyway, you are humble enough to become a champion again. Last thing, and this one is funny, every turn the player with the most victory points is declared the usurper and is given the usurper ring. This ring means that he has the greatest military power, so he is on the way to seize Alexander's lineage by sheer strength. And any player can thus attack the usurper without losing his champion status, so without losing his 3 legitimacy points. The usurper ring is some kind of license to be attacked. It is not good in this game to be in the leader's seat. Okay, these are the 2 ways to win an instant victory. If you reach 20 victory points or 18 legitimacy points, whatever the moment, the game immediately ends and you win. Now, there are other ways. First, the Regency victory. It's when, with time passing by, the young Alexandros reaches the age to inherit Alexander's throne. This time is the beginning of turn 4. As we will see in the following video, the game is divided in 5 turns. At the beginning of turn 4, if nobody previously won, the player with the most victory points plus legitimacy points win the game. Unless a player is controlling Alexandros and decides to assassinate him. So, let's see an example. It's turn 3, turn 4 is coming. Red player checks every player's sum of victory points plus legitimacy points. He sees he is not in the lead. Thus, his best solution is to take control of Alexandros as soon as possible, so at the beginning of turn 4, he just declares he kills him to avoid the victory of yellow player who has the largest sum of victory plus legitimacy points, and the game goes on. It could seem difficult, but if you think about it, in this situation, blue, black, red and green players, at the beginning of turn 4, all want the same thing, to assassinate the young Alexandros. So, in fact, the situation is more difficult for a yellow player who must protect the young king. Then, the same happens again with Heracles at the beginning of turn 5. Alexandros being dead, it is time to seat the illegitimate son on the throne, and thus, again, the player with the largest sum of victory points plus legitimacy points wins, unless the player who controls Heracles decides to assassinate him. In other words, if you are in the lead in the sum of victory points plus legitimacy points, you'd better control Alexandros or Heracles to prevent him from being savagely killed by your fellow opponents. And finally, if the game goes to its end, to the end of turn 5, final victory goes to the player with the most victory points. This means that after nearly 25 years of succession war, nobody took the throne, neither by strength nor by legitimacy, and so victory goes to the strongest man. At this point, legitimacy is worth nothing. Okay, so that's clear and you know how to win the game. There's a lot of things I didn't explain, how you control people from the royal family, how you dig Alexander's tomb, what are those cards that bring legitimacy points, and so on. But at least you know the most important thing, you know your goal. You know it, except for one detail. In the case of Regency victory or end-of-game victory, there can be ties. If several players have the same number of victory points or the same sum of victory points plus legitimacy points, in such a case, the player controlling Macedonia wins the tie. If none of the tied players control Macedonia, the one owning the most Macedonian troops, the white counters, wins. And if they are still tied after that, victory goes to the one who controls the highest seniority general. Every general has a seniority from 1 to 20 without any duplicates. And that's all for this video. I see you in the next one, the main one, where we will learn how to move armies, how to fight, how to win this victory and legitimacy points you need so much.